the battle that should be in every history book. Hill Eerie's fiercest warriors, they say, is written by the victors, history, but it's really defined by the struggle. It's carved into the earth not just by huge armies marching across continents, but by small groups of determined soldiers clinging to desolate pieces of land that will be forgotten by all but a few. These are the battles that don't decide the outcome of a war, but instead define the character of the men who fight them. They're stories of impossible odds, unimaginable pressure, and a kind of courage so profound it demands to be remembered. Some battlefields are hallowed ground, their names echoing through generations: Normandy, Stalingrad, Gettysburg. But other names are just whispers, known only to the regiments that bled there and the historians who comb through dusty archives. These are the places where legends were forged in secret, where the true measure of a soldier was taken, not for headlines or glory, but for the man standing next to him in a foxhole. This is the story of one such place, a lonely, God-forsaken outpost in Korea, a place of frozen mud and shattered rock that had no right to be so important. Its name was Hill Eerie. The air on Hill Eerie was thin, frozen, and thick with the smell of cordite and death. For a handful of soldiers from nations thousands of miles from home, it was the very edge of the world. Below them, hidden by the darkness and the rugged terrain, thousands of enemy soldiers were massing, a silent promise of a human wave that would soon crash against their meager defenses. Reinforcements weren't coming. Artillery support was a desperate gamble. Surrender was not an option. Their orders were simple, brutal, and absolute. Hold the hill at all costs. This is the story of how they did the impossible. A battle so fierce, so defined by raw courage, it should be in every history book. Chapter 1: The Bloody Stalemate. By 1952, the Korean War had lost the sweeping momentum of its early days. The grand advances and retreats of 1950 and 1951 had ground to a halt, replaced by a brutal, agonizing war of attrition. The front line had hardened into something horrifically reminiscent of World War I's Western Front. It was a jagged scar across the Korean peninsula, a network of trenches, bunkers, and barbed wire that stretched from coast to coast. This was the Jamestown Line. In this static phase, the war changed. It became a war of outposts, small isolated hills, often given grimly unimaginative names by the soldiers defending them, became the focal points of unimaginable violence. These weren't strategic objectives in the grand sense. Taking one wouldn't cause a city to fall or an army to collapse. Instead, their value was tactical, almost intimate. They were observation posts, listening stations, and forward positions for launching patrols and raids into no man's land. To hold one was to control the immediate landscape, to see the enemy, direct artillery, and protect the main line of resistance just behind it. To lose one was to give the enemy a dagger aimed at your throat. 10 miles west of the war-ravaged town of Chorwan lay a particularly vicious stretch of this front, a series of interconnected hills and ridges known to UN forces as the T-Bone Ridge sector. It was a landscape of sharp inclines and deep valleys that favored the defender. And jutting out from this ridge, like a gnarled, broken tooth, was a hill designated Outpost Eerie. Hill Eerie, also known as Hill 191, wasn't imposing. It was a desolate, treeless mound, scarred by bombardments and fortified with bunkers and trenches. Its slopes were wrapped in concentric rings of barbed wire, a grim attempt to slow down the inevitable assaults. But its position was critical.
It offered a commanding view of the surrounding terrain, a key vantage point that both the United Nations Command and the Chinese People's Volunteer Army, or PVA, coveted with a deadly obsession. This was the nature of the stalemate. The war had become a contest of inches, a meat grinder where the currency was human lives spent to capture and hold these miserable, shattered hills. Generals on both sides fed men into the fight for these outposts, knowing the cost would be horrific. And the soldiers on the ground, living in frozen mud and constant fear, understood the grim reality. Hill Eerie wasn't just a piece of geography, it was a symbol. It was a place that demanded sacrifice, a place that had already drunk its share of blood, and a place that was about to become the stage for one of the most ferocious and overlooked battles of the war. The hill had a reputation, and it was about to earn it. Chapter 2: The First Stand, an American Tragedy. The reputation of Hill Eerie was cemented in blood in March of 1952. The job of holding this precarious outpost fell to the soldiers of the U.S. 45th Infantry Division, specifically Company K of the 179th Infantry Regiment. These men, part of an Oklahoma National Guard unit federalized for the war, were about to learn the brutal math of outpost warfare. On the night of March 21st, Lieutenant Omer Manley led his platoon of just 26 men up the treacherous path to occupy the outpost. The platoon was standard for the time: 2 rifle squads, a light machine gun squad, and a 60mm mortar squad, just enough firepower to hold off a probe, but nowhere near enough for what was coming. They settled into the 9 bunkers dotting the hill, checked their ammo, and stared into the oppressive darkness. The hill was quiet, but it was a predatory silence. Manley, following procedure, sent out patrols to scout the perimeter, hoping to spot any enemy movement early. It didn't take long. Both patrols spotted the Chinese on the move. At 11:30 p.m., the night exploded. A company-sized PVA force launched a determined assault, aiming to overrun the outpost and take prisoners. The attack began with a classic PVA tactic: intense machine gun fire to suppress the defenders while assault teams moved in to cut the barbed wire. Mortar rounds began to walk across the hilltop, the terrifying thump, thump, thump of their launch followed by the ear-splitting crack of their detonation. Inside the bunkers, Manley's men fought back with everything they had. For a time it seemed they might hold, but the PVA were relentless. They were masters of the night assault, using overwhelming numbers and sheer determination to breach defenses. The fight became a desperate, close-quarters affair. Grenades were thrown back and forth. The distinct, rapid chatter of Chinese burp guns grew louder as they closed in. Captain Max Clark tried to support the besieged platoon from a nearby position, but the chaos on Eerie was absolute. Communication with Lieutenant Manley's platoon went dead. Colonel Frederick A. Doherty, the regimental commander, made an agonizing choice. He ordered Captain Clark to concentrate all available artillery fire directly on top of Hill Eerie, a desperate move to destroy the attackers, even if it meant hitting his own men. After the barrage lifted, a force was sent to retake the hill. What they found at sunrise was a scene of utter devastation. Of the 26 Americans who had defended the outpost, 8 were dead and 4 were wounded. 2, including Lieutenant Manley himself and Corporal Joel Ybarra, were missing, later confirmed as prisoners of war. The price of their defense was written on the hillside around them. 31 enemy dead were recovered. The American stand was a tragedy, but it set the stage for the even fiercer battles to come. Chapter 3: The Filipino Lions of Eerie. As the brutal stalemate ground on, the UN command rotated its international contingents through the most dangerous sectors. A new unit was assigned to the area. They were soldiers from a nation with its own recent brutal experience with war, the Philippine Expeditionary Forces to Korea, or PEFTOK. The Philippines had been one of the first nations to answer the UN's call, and its soldiers had already distinguished themselves. These were not green troops. Many were veterans, hardened by fighting Japanese invaders in World War II and in anti-insurgency campaigns at home. They had earned a reputation as tough, skilled, and incredibly tenacious fighters, known as the Filipino Lions, a nickname earned in blood. By the spring of 1952, it was the 20th Battalion Combat Team, BCT, commanded by Colonel Salvador Absede, that had found itself attached to the U.S. 45th Infantry Division and deployed to the Chorwan sector. They were inheriting the blood-soaked legacy of Hill
Eerie, moving into a sector where American soldiers had already died for inches of ground. The Filipino soldiers brought a unique perspective. They came from a tropical country, and the bitter Korean cold was a constant enemy. Yet their combat experience had instilled in them a remarkable resilience. The 10th BCT had already proven at the Battle of Yultong in 1951 that Filipino soldiers would not break, even when surrounded and facing overwhelming odds. That battle became a foundational legend for PEFTOK, a story of a unit that refused to be overrun. Now, in May 1952, the 20th BCT was tasked with confronting the PVA's grip on T-Bone Ridge. Their mission was to disrupt Chinese lines and seize key terrain while frustrating armistice talks dragged on. At the heart of this mission was the same stubborn, deadly piece of real estate, Hill Eerie. The Chinese had refortified the hill since the March battles. It was a hornet's nest of bunkers and machine gun emplacements with a commanding view. Any assault would be an uphill battle, literally, against a dug-in and waiting enemy. Colonel Absede and his operations officer, Major Felizardo Tanabe, knew the task ahead. They were fighting to uphold the reputation forged by their predecessors. Among the young officers in the 20th BCT was a 24-year-old second lieutenant. He was about to undergo his baptism by fire, and his name was Fidel V. Ramos. Chapter 4: The Filipino Lions of Eerie. The Filipino assault on Hill Eerie wasn't a single desperate charge, but a calculated series of engagements that showed off their tactical smarts and sheer grit. The battle began in earnest on May 18, 1952. The first phase consisted of probing raids to test the Chinese defenses. A young officer named Lieutenant Rodolfo Maestro led the initial raids. On May 18th, his patrol engaged the enemy in a sharp firefight that left 28 PVA Chinese soldiers dead. The next day, May 19th, they did it again, killing another 23 enemy soldiers with the support of UN artillery and tanks. These were brutal, high-risk operations. Lieutenant Leopoldo Regas, who led an assault on the 19th, was later recognized for his extraordinary leadership. The Filipinos were sending a clear message. They were not intimidated, and they were coming for the hill. These raids were just the prelude. Colonel Absede and Major Tanabe knew a frontal assault in daylight would be suicide. The final attack had to be one of stealth, speed, and overwhelming violence. The mission was given to the 44-man 2nd Reconnaissance Platoon. Its leader was the young officer, Second Lieutenant Fidel V. Ramos. While some records refer to Ramos as a West Point graduate, he actually graduated from the Philippine Military Academy before taking advanced courses in the United States. Ramos meticulously planned the operation, dividing his platoon into specialized teams: scouts, assault, snipers, and a demolition team with explosives. They were also joined by an artillery forward observer team to call in fire with pinpoint accuracy.
On the night of May 21st, under the cover of darkness, Ramos and his men set out. For 2 agonizing hours, they crawled through the mud of rice paddies and used irrigation ditches for cover, slowly closing the 400-meter gap to the base of the hill. Then the signal was given. An immense preparatory barrage from U.S. artillery battalions slammed into the crest of Hill Eerie. As the last shells exploded, Ramos and his men surged forward. What followed was 2 hours of pure, concentrated chaos. The Filipinos swarmed the trenches, fighting with rifles and grenades at close quarters. The demolition teams moved from bunker to bunker, tossing in explosive charges that silenced the machine gun nests. All the while, Ramos calmly directed his men, coordinating their movements and calling in fire from supporting UN tanks. Overhead, U.S. F-86 Sabre jets were on station, ready to neutralize any Chinese reinforcements. It was a perfectly executed raid. By 7:28 a.m., the job was done. The platoon had systematically destroyed the PVA fortifications. Having achieved their objective, sabotaging the position rather than occupying it permanently, they withdrew as UN tanks resumed their bombardment of the shattered hilltop. The results were astonishing. In a 2-hour engagement, Ramos's platoon suffered only 1 man wounded. The PVA losses from the combined assault and artillery were catastrophic. The young Lieutenant Fidel V. Ramos had passed his baptism by fire with legendary success. The Filipino lions had roared, and their courage on Hill Eerie would become a point of immense national pride. Chapter 5: The Cost of Courage and a Resilient Defense. The successful raid on May 21st was a tactical masterclass, but it wasn't the end of the fight. The Chinese People's Volunteer Army wasn't an enemy that gave up ground easily. A counterattack was inevitable. The Filipino soldiers, having shown their offensive punch, would now have to prove their defensive grit. Following the stunning assault, UN forces reoccupied the hill, but the area remained a cauldron of violence. In June, the rotation of forces continued. On June 16, 1952, the 19th Philippine Battalion Combat Team, under Colonel Ramon Z. Aguirre, arrived to relieve the American battalion that had taken over the sector. They were stepping directly into the line of fire. They didn't wait long. On June 18th, the PVA unleashed their fury. An intense artillery and mortar barrage hammered the Filipino positions, the classic precursor to a major ground assault. The men of the 19th BCT hunkered down, weathered the storm of steel, and prepared for the attack they knew was coming. When the PVA infantry charged, the Filipinos met them with a wall of defensive fire, repulsing the attack. 2 days later, on June 20th, the PVA came again. They launched another massive, coordinated attack, throwing troops not just at Hill Eerie, but at the entire T-Bone Ridge area. This time, the People's Volunteer Army of the Chinese Infantry managed to close the distance. As dawn broke, they surged into the Filipino trenches, and the fighting devolved into the most primal form of combat. Soldiers fought with bayonets, trench knives, and bare fists. Once again, the Filipino soldiers refused to break. They met the assault with ferocious courage and held their positions against the human wave. By the time the full light of morning spread across the battlefield, the attack had been broken, though the artillery duel continued. The UN forces, anchored by the unshakable defense of the 19th BCT, still held Hill Eerie. The PVA suffered an estimated 500 casualties in that assault, while the Filipinos sustained 24 casualties in their heroic defense. The battles of May and June 1952 came at a cost. The 20th BCT, during its tour, suffered 13 killed, 100 wounded, and 1 missing in action. The men of the 19th BCT also paid in blood. Yet through their actions, they cemented PEFTOK's legacy in Korea. Officers like Lieutenants Maestro, Regas, and of course the future president Fidel V. Ramos were decorated for their valor. They had not only taken the hill, they had held it. Chapter 6: The Forgotten Borinqueneers and a War of Inches. The story of Hill Eerie is a mosaic of international courage, but the Filipinos weren't the only overlooked group to pour out their blood on those desolate hills. Another storied unit, whose contributions are often forgotten, fought in that same vicious sector: the 65th Infantry Regiment of the United States Army. This was a unique unit. Composed almost entirely of soldiers from Puerto Rico, they were known as the Borinqueneers, from Boriken, the indigenous Taíno name for their island. Like the Filipinos, they were U.S. nationals from a tropical island fighting in a harsh foreign climate. And like the Filipinos, they had a fierce pride they were determined to prove on the battlefield. The Korean War was their crucible. As the battle for the T-Bone Ridge complex raged through the summer and into the fall of 1952, the Borinqueneers found themselves in the same relentless fight for inches of ground. While the Filipino actions at Hill Eerie were in May and June, the struggle for the surrounding outposts was constant.
In September 1952, the Borinqueneers were tasked with assaults on Outpost Kelly, a position not far from the T-Bone sector that shared its deadly reputation. The fighting they encountered was tragically familiar. They charged up steep, barren slopes, cutting through barbed wire under a hail of machine gun and artillery fire. They faced PVA counterattacks in the dead of night, where bugles and whistles signaled human wave assaults that threatened to overwhelm them. The battle for Outpost Kelly was a grim litany of attack and counterattack. The Borinqueneers suffered heavy casualties in the bloody fighting, but their bravery was undeniable. This phase of the war, from the summer of 1952 onwards, was a war of inches. For the soldiers on the ground, whether they were from Oklahoma, the Philippines, or Puerto Rico, the war was reduced to the 100 yards of no man's land in front of their foxhole. The heroism of the Borinqueneers, like that of the Filipinos, is a crucial part of the story of the bloody ridges of Korea, a testament to the diverse and often unheralded warriors who made their legendary stand there. Chapter 7: The Final Act and an Unsettled Legacy. The war for Hill Eerie didn't end in 1952. The hill remained a bleeding wound on the Jamestown line right up until the armistice. Control of the outpost became a symbol of national will, a place where both sides spent lives to make a point at the negotiating table. The fighting ebbed and flowed with the rhythm of the truce talks. A stalemate in the tent often meant a bloody assault on the front. The hill and the T-Bone sector changed hands multiple times. After the Philippine 19th BCT's defense in June, they were relieved in July by the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division. Later, soldiers from the Colombian Battalion would also take their turn defending these deadly outposts, continuing the multinational sacrifice. Each time the hill was taken, the victor found a shattered, corpse-strewn landscape. The bunkers were never secure. They were just temporary shelters waiting for the next artillery barrage. Survival was a matter of luck, and victory was measured in the ability to endure. The final major battles for the area occurred in July 1953, just days before the Korean Armistice Agreement was signed. In a last bloody offensive, the PVA threw massive forces at the UN lines to seize as much territory as possible. Once again, the hills erupted in violence, and once again, Filipino soldiers, this time from the 14th BCT, were in the thick of it, establishing blocking positions and launching patrols as the war came to its chaotic end. When the armistice was signed on July 27, 1953, the guns fell silent. The line of contact became the demilitarized zone. Hill Eerie, the site of so much valor, ultimately ended up on the north side of the line. After all the battles, all the lives lost, all the acts of incredible heroism, the hill was conceded. This outcome is a big reason why the story is so often overlooked. In a war that ended in a stalemate with no glorious victory, battles for small objectives that were ultimately given up can seem futile. Yet its legacy isn't defined by its final place on a map. It's written in the character of the men who fought there. It's the story of Lieutenant Manley's outnumbered platoon, of Lieutenant Ramos's legendary raid, of the 19th BCT refusing to break, and of the Burincaneers and Colombians who held the line. Hill Eerie should be remembered precisely because it wasn't a grand strategic victory. It was a place that stripped war down to its most essential element, the courage of a soldier against impossible odds. The story of Hill Eerie is not a story of triumph. It is a story of endurance. It shows that the most profound acts of bravery often happen far from the limelight, on forsaken patches of earth, for objectives that history might deem insignificant. The soldiers who fought there, the Americans from Oklahoma, the Filipinos who became the Lions of Erie, the proud Puerto Rican Burincaneers, the Colombians, and all the others, weren't fighting for lines on a map. In the final, terrifying moments of combat, they were fighting for each other. They faced an enemy that was disciplined, courageous, and seemingly limitless in number. They attacked and defended, they won and they lost, and they bled for every single inch of that worthless, vital ground. The battles for Hill Eerie were a microcosm of the entire Korean War, brutal, costly, and ultimately inconclusive, yet defined by moments of unbelievable human courage. Today, the hill sits silently in the North Korean countryside, its slopes likely healed, hiding the scars of war. But the memory of what happened there must not fade. The valor of the Filipino expeditionary forces, who repeatedly proved their ferocity and skill, deserves a prominent place in military history. The sacrifice of all the UN soldiers who stood their ground on that outpost is a story that should be told not as a tale of victory, but as a powerful lesson in the price of freedom and the unbreakable nature of the human spirit. The battle for Hill Eerie should be in every history book, not because it changed the world, but because it showed the world what a few good men are willing to endure to keep it from changing for the worse. If you believe stories of forgotten courage deserve to be told, please like, share, and subscribe for more chapters from the overlooked pages of history. Let's make sure these heroes are never forgotten. Thank you so much for subscribing, liking, and commenting on our video. May God reward you for your kindness. God bless us all.